My mother never said she hated me. She didn't have to. She showed it in the way she dressed my sister in silk and handed me her leftovers, in the way she praised my sister's breathing and blamed me for existing. I learned very early that in our house, love was a currency, and I was born broke. We grew up in the same house, under the same roof, eating at the same wooden table every night. From the outside, we looked like a normal family. Quiet street, trimmed lawn, curtains always drawn just right. But inside that house, something invisible divided us. My sister, Alara, moved through the rooms like she belonged to them, like the walls knew her name. When she laughed, my mother, Marion Hale, laughed with her. When Alara spoke, my mother leaned in, listening, nodding, encouraging. When I spoke, my mother's eyes drifted elsewhere, to the sink, to the clock, to anything but me. Alara was never told to lower her voice. I was told not to talk so much. Alara was called my sunshine. I was called too sensitive. Even as a child, I could feel it, the way affection naturally flowed in one direction. It was subtle, no shouting, no obvious cruelty, just a constant reminder that love had already been assigned, and I wasn't the chosen one. At night, lying in bed, I used to wonder what I had done wrong, what rule I had broken before I was even old enough to remember. I didn't know it yet, but that house had already made its decision, and I was living in a place where I would always have to earn what my sister received freely. The difference became clearer as we grew older. Alara's childhood was wrapped in softness, new dresses that still smelled like the store, piano lessons every Saturday morning, birthday parties planned weeks in advance, with decorations my mother chose carefully. Mine was made of leftovers. If Alara outgrew a sweater, it became mine. If there was one cookie left, it went to her, because she'd appreciate it more. When Alara cried, my mother rushed to her side, brushing her hair back gently, whispering comfort. When I cried, my mother exhaled sharply, as if my tears were an inconvenience. "Stop exaggerating. You're fine. You always make things bigger than they are." Those words followed me everywhere. At school events, my mother stood proudly beside Alara, introducing her to everyone. "She's so talented," she'd say. I stood a few steps behind, invisible, hoping someone might ask my name. Slowly, I learned how to disappear without leaving the room. I learned that asking for attention only made things worse, that wanting love too openly pushed it even farther away. So I became quiet, observant, careful, because in that house, love wasn't denied loudly, it was denied softly, over and over again. And the quieter I became, the easier it was for them to forget I was ever there. I was 8 years old the first time I understood that something about me was wrong. Not wrong in a loud way, wrong in the quiet way adults never explain. It was late. The house was half asleep. I had gotten out of bed to get water when I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen, low, careful, the kind of voice people use when they think no one is listening. She was unexpected, my mother said into the phone. I stopped, walking. There was a pause. Then she continued, softer this time. Yes, if I'm honest, my life would have been easier without her. Her, not my name, not my daughter, just her. My hands tightened around the edge of the wall as I stood there, my chest feeling too tight for my small body. I waited, hoping she'd correct herself, hoping she'd say something kind to balance it out. She didn't. She laughed quietly instead. I went back to my room without the water. That night, I stared at the ceiling, trying to understand how a child could make a life harder just by being born. From that moment on, I stopped asking my mother why she loved Alara more. I stopped asking what I could do to be better, because for the first time, I understood. It wasn't about what I did, it was about who I was. Cliffhanger. And once a child realizes she is unwanted, she never forgets it. As the years passed, Alara didn't just stay the favorite. She became the proof that my mother had done something right. Alara grew into beauty effortlessly. Teachers adored her. Friends surrounded her. Compliments followed her like a shadow. My mother watched her the way artists admire their best work. She gets that from me, my mother would say proudly. She's special. I learned early that my role was to stand slightly behind Alara, close enough to help, far enough not to compete. If Alara struggled with school, my mother said she was overwhelmed. If I struggled, I was not trying hard enough. If Alara made a mistake, it was forgotten quickly. If I did, it became a reminder of everything my mother already believed about me. I started doing more, helping more, asking for less. I thought if I made myself useful, maybe I'd earn a place. But love doesn't work like that. The more Alara shined, the smaller I felt beside her. And my mother encouraged that difference, subtly, constantly. "She's just stronger than you," she'd say about Alara. "You need to toughen up." What she didn't see, or didn't want to, was that strength built on attention looks very different from strength built on neglect. And soon, that difference would turn me into the villain of my own family. On an ordinary afternoon. That's how these moments usually arrive, quietly, without warning. My mother stood in the living room holding her purse, her fingers tight around the strap. Her eyes were sharp when they landed on me. "Did you take money from my bag?" she asked. I blinked, confused. "No," I said immediately. "I didn't." She didn't ask where I had been. She didn't ask if I'd seen anyone else near it. She just looked past me. "Ilara," she called. My sister stepped forward slowly, her face carefully neutral. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at my mother either. "I don't know," Ilara said softly, "but I did see her near your room earlier." That was all it took. My mother's expression changed, not into anger, but into something worse. Confirmation. "I should have known," she said. Those 4 words settled deep in my chest. Not, "I'm disappointed," not, "let's talk about this." Just the certainty that I was exactly who she already believed I was. I tried to explain, I tried to defend myself. My voice shook the more I spoke, and that only made her more convinced. "See," she said, "always dramatic." That day, I wasn't punished for stealing. I was punished for existing in a role already written for me. And that was the moment I learned something important. Truth doesn't matter when someone is waiting for you to fail. After that day, I stopped trying to prove my innocence because I realized it was never on trial. By the time I turned 18, the house felt smaller than ever. Every room carried a memory of silence I'd learned to keep. Every corner reminded me of how carefully I had learned to shrink. When I told my mother I was leaving, she didn't ask where I was going. She didn't ask how I'd manage. She nodded once and handed me a small bag. "Try not to embarrass us," she said, adjusting the collar of her blouse like we were discussing something trivial. That was it. No hug, no warning not to forget to call, no "be safe." Ilara stayed in her room. I didn't blame her. She had never learned how to stand beside me, only above me. As I stepped out of that house, I waited for something to stop me. A voice, a hand on my shoulder, a last-second regret. Nothing came. Walking away felt like breathing after holding my lungs full for years. But freedom came with its own kind of pain, because when no one misses you, you start wondering if you were ever really there. I thought leaving would end this story, but it was only the beginning of what survival would cost me. Starting over in a new place felt less like freedom and more like being dropped into deep water without knowing how to swim. I moved to a quiet city where no one knew my name or my history. No one knew I had grown up begging silently for affection. On paper, that sounded like a gift. In reality, it was terrifying. I worked long hours, sometimes 2 jobs. Not because I was ambitious, but because staying busy kept the memories quiet. At night, when the city went still, the old voices came back. My mother's disappointment, her certainty that I would never be enough. I learned how to function without asking for help, how to smile without revealing too much, how to accept crumbs of affection and call it independence. Meanwhile, from a distance, I watched my family's life continue without me. My mother posted photos of Ilara, celebrating her achievements, her milestones, her happiness. Every caption spoke of pride, of love. My absence went unnoticed, and that was the most painful part. Not that they let me go, but that they didn't feel the loss. I was learning how to survive alone when the past reached out and refused to stay buried. The call came on an ordinary afternoon. A number I hadn't seen in years lit up my phone. For a moment, I considered letting it ring. Some doors feel safer when left closed. But something in my chest tightened, and I answered. My mother's voice sounded different, smaller, weaker, stripped of the sharp authority I remembered. "She's asking for you," the nurse said later. "Your mother." Not Alara. Me. The word echoed in my mind the entire drive to the hospital. When I walked into the room, I barely recognized her. The woman who once filled every space with control now looked fragile, almost lost beneath white sheets and quiet machines. She looked at me like she was trying to remember who I was. We sat there in silence, surrounded by things neither of us knew how to say. Years of neglect stood between us, unspoken but heavy. For the first time, she didn't look at me with disappointment. She looked at me with something closer to fear. And I realized then, time had taken something from her that she could never get back. I didn't know yet what she wanted from me, but I knew this visit would change everything. Hospitals have a way of shrinking everything else in your life. The beeping machines, the smell of antiseptic, the way time feels suspended between breaths. I sat beside my mother's bed, my hands folded tightly in my lap, afraid that if I relaxed, something fragile inside me might spill out. She watched me for a long moment before speaking. "You look tired," she said. I almost laughed. I had been tired my entire life, but I didn't say that. Instead, she turned her face toward the window and spoke in a voice I had never heard before. Not sharp, not commanding, just worn. "You remind me of your father," she said quietly. My body stiffened. "The man who left," she continued. "Every time I looked at you, I saw him walking away again." The words hung heavy between us. She wasn't apologizing. She was explaining years of distance, years of coldness, years of choosing my sister over me. "I didn't know how to separate you from that pain," she admitted. I listened without interrupting, realizing something painful and clarifying all at once. Her cruelty had never been about me. It had been about what I represented. And just when I thought I understood everything, she revealed the part she had never admitted before. "Alara always needed protection," my mother said after a long pause. "She was fragile. She couldn't handle disappointment the way you could." I looked at her then, really looked. My sister hadn't been stronger. She had been sheltered, shielded from consequences, shielded from reality, protected so much that she never learned how to stand on her own. My mother squeezed my hand weakly. "You were strong," she said. "You survived without me." The words were meant to sound like praise. They felt like an excuse. Strength born from neglect isn't a gift. It's a scar. For the first time, I saw the truth clearly. We were both shaped by the same woman, just in different ways. Alara shone because she was constantly polished. I endured because I was left alone. Golden children glitter, but they break easily. And soon I would have to decide whether understanding my mother meant forgiving her or finally choosing myself. The days blurred after that conversation. Machines beeped, nurses came and went. The world outside moved, but inside that room, time had no meaning. My mother reached for my hand one morning, trembling slightly. "I'm sorry I never chose you," she whispered. Her apology wasn't theatrical. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was small, almost swallowed by the hum of the hospital. I looked at her, feeling the weight of every childhood day I had spent invisible. I didn't cry. I didn't hug her, because some wounds don't heal with words. Some absences aren't fixed by apologies. Instead, I squeezed her hand back, letting her know I heard her. That acknowledgement was enough for her. For me, it was the beginning of letting go. I realized forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about me, about finally choosing to release the pain she had unintentionally inflicted. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, and I had a choice to make: stay tethered to the past or step into my own life fully. After the funeral, Alara approached me, her face pale with grief and the guilt she had never known how to show. I wish things were different," she said softly. I nodded once, a quiet understanding passing between us. Some bonds aren't about words. Some connections are just acknowledgments of shared history. I didn't speak about the past. I didn't need to. I had spent years surviving in the shadows, and now, for the first time, I felt visible in my own life. I walked out of the house one last time, unburdened. No one held me back. No one demanded I shrink. No one required my silence. I chose myself, and in that choice, I found the freedom that had been denied to me for so long. For the first time, I was enough, not because anyone else decided it, but because I finally did. Not all mothers know how to love. Not all families are safe. But survival is still a form of victory. If her story made your heart ache or reminded you of your own family, hit like and comment "I relate" below, because surviving is nothing without someone to understand it.